I think I'm live. I think I'm live. These things always baffle me. Sorry, somebody was just trying to call me there, so apologies. There we go. Hello, happy Saturday. Happy flipping Saturday. How are you all doing? So I wanted to do this free training because it's been a while since I've done something like this. And there's been so much that has been happening for me lately. The first thing that I really need to share with you is that I am probably still going through a spiritual awakening, which has been quite bizarre, which is something that I never ever perceived was going to happen when I started manifesting. Um, so, um, and the reason that I'm here with you today is I wanted to share with you what my beliefs are around manifestation now, because they have changed quite significantly. So I wanted to share that with you today. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Susan. Hello, nice to meet you. I started manifesting. I started really understanding and studying manifestation. It would have been, I started when I read The Secret, which was many years ago, many years ago. And I really, really understood it. I really thought that is how I want to live. But what happened was I I never embodied it. And I think this is the biggest thing with manifestation, is when you don't embody it, then you won't see any difference. It's not enough to just know this stuff. It's not enough to just like understand what you're reading and to intellectually take it in. So I did read The Secret, and was quite excited with the thought of making that part of my life. But what happened was, I then came across Bob Proctor, as you would do when you have read The Secret and your devices know that you've read The Secret. Bob Proctor kept coming up on my feed, kept coming up all the time on my feed. And I decided to take the course. So at this point, I engaged with a consultant of Bob Proctor's and I started training in that course. And the course is called Thinking into Results. Absolutely phenomenal course. And I still read the book. I don't know where my book is now, but I still have the workbook and I still read that. So quickly after that, I'd not started that. That was about November. And then in the January, my marriage ended very suddenly, very dramatically, and with no warning whatsoever. So my life was thrown apart. My life was thrown into chaos, is the only word I can describe it as. So, here I am in the marital home. Marriage had ended. We had a business. I had my business. We had 12 years of things that were still going on. And I was very much in my victim, still didn't really understand this whole manifestation malarkey, very much in my victim. And I perceived at that time that he had moved on, which I could see visibly. And he had already started living a different life. Meantime, here I am thinking, what the heck's just happened? Why am I in this place? Why is this happening to me? Oh my gosh. And I sunk really, really low. So at that point, I thought, I really need to get myself, I really need to shift out of this. I really need to shift out of that mentality of being a victim. I really need to set something, I really need to do something different here, because I cannot continue to do this. I cannot continue to live like this. So that is when I really decided that I was going to study Bob Proctor's material, and I was really going, like, that was going to be my focus. I was going to focus on that, and that became my life. Because then I'd been for counselling, and counselling wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy any part of it whatsoever. I didn't enjoy feeling the way I felt. I didn't enjoy anything about counselling at all. I'm not dissing any counsellors, it's just not for me. So I thought, right, okay, if Bob Proctor says, you know, Bob would always say, tell me what you want and I'll show you how to get it. And I thought, great, if you're going to tell me what I want, I'm going to say that I want to have calmness. I want to have peace. I want to live in a different state. So that is exactly what I done. And then round about May of the following year, I decided that I wanted to help other people by this. I wanted to show other people that we have lived incorrectly. Um, and then from there, I became a consultant with Bob. And from there, things have just gone from better to better to better. My understanding now has gone down quite a different path. So I used to always say that I coached mindset. I don't say that anymore. I don't coach mindset anymore. And I'm going to share with you today, I've got some notes, so if you see me looking, I'm going to share with you today some of the things that have changed massively for me in order for me to get consistent manifestations, because I got to a point where the manifestation stopped. So I had an extremely good income. I had, you know, I did have the what I still regard as a good marriage. It brought me a lot of joy. There was things that I would have changed, but it was a good marriage. And then and I had a really steady income, like, and a good income. I had an amazing house with the most amazing stuff in it. We had the cars, we had the holidays, we had the stuff, we had it all. And then after my marriage ended, I still had that. I still had all that. But what happened after that is, okay, I the more that I got engaged into this work, it was like the less and less, like more, less and less was, or more and more things were getting taken away from me. And I went from having what I would regard as everything to having nothing. Yet I'm doing all this work. How can that be? How can that be? So that took me down the path where I started to study the self. I started studying me, because here's the thing, is I firmly believe that we all come into this world the same. We are all the same. We are all equal. What changes is how we use our mind, is how we identify as who we think we are. That is the one thing that I believe is different in all of us. Because if you take money, for example, if you are born into a wealthy, abundant home or family, you would never experience what poverty felt like. Never experience. You wouldn't, so we're not born with poverty mindset. But when you are, because if you were in a wealthy, abundant environment, you would never know what poverty is. So we're not born with any of these conditions or thoughts and beliefs that we perceive that we have. We're not born with them. They are, we learn them. We learn them from everything that's in our environment. We learn about poverty because of our environment. We learn about love because of our environment. Again, if you are born into a loving, nourishing community and environment, that is all you will experience. So when somebody would say to you, my parents don't love me, you're like, well, what? That seems so foreign. So we are, our environment is absolutely everything, because that's where we learn. And let me share with you, 96% of the population all live in fear, doubt, and worry. And we inherit that from our parents, who inherited it from their parents, who inherited it from their parents. So you weren't born like that. And it wasn't that that person that has a different, who has an abundant mindset, they are no different to you. They weren't gifted with something. I always believed that. I thought, God, they must have got something. They must have something different from me. Yet at the same time, it was always a core belief of mine that we are all the same. We all have the same abilities. We all have the same gifts. So working with Bob Proctor confirmed that, because Bob came from an environment where he didn't go to school, he didn't get an education. He didn't study anything. And then he started studying the mind, and studying success. And lo and behold, he was one of the biggest coaches, and influencers within the personal growth arena. But what I was thinking was, I'm engrossed in this work. I'm doing all the things. Why am I losing more? Why am I not getting more manifestations? So I could get the small things. And sometimes I even still believe that they were just synchronicities about the free coffee and getting the car parking space outside the supermarket. It's always one that we are told when you start manifesting. And that was great. And I was using my faculties, because that's part of Bob's training, is he introduces you to your faculties, your higher faculties that you were gifted as a human. No other species on this planet has these faculties. So we were introduced to our faculties. But I still was not getting the results. And I kept thinking, well, why? Why am I not getting the results? I'm doing all the things, and why are other people getting the results and I'm not getting the results? And this is, as I said before, this is where I started studying the self, because it's all to do with the self. Because they were getting better results than me, doesn't mean there was anything different in me. It was me. I was the different one, but it was nothing else. So I had to start looking at the self, and you might hear about that as being called self concept, or self image, is a, a description that's often used to describe the self. Because once I started understanding that it was me, it all lay on my shoulders about why I was not getting the results and why I was losing everything instead of gaining everything. And it all come down to my beliefs. So then I started studying the belief system, and I started understanding where that comes from and how to overcome belief systems. And that brought me, because belief systems, and Bob taught this as well, that when you have a belief, you can change that belief. And it's in your mind. A belief comes from the mind. A belief comes from a thought. A belief is just a thought that you've had over and over and over again, and it becomes real. So I was always told as a child, Susan, you're shy. You're shy. My mum would introduce me. She said, "Oh, this is Susan. She's quite shy. She might not speak to you." So I grew up with a belief that I was shy, and I just believed it. I just believed it. I didn't for one, I didn't question it. I just thought, all right, okay, they know better. I'm shy. So I became this shy girl. And even at school, I think they might have thought I was a mute at some point, because I was like, well, I'm shy. We have this image of ourselves, and we believe that to be true, but that image that you have of yourself is not even the real image, because it's come from other people's opinion, and it's come from other people's opinions and beliefs that they have inherited, the same way that you've inherited, for instance, being shy. It's the same process. The same process. So they've told you my mum told me that I was shy based on her belief system, and her belief system about what shyness is, etc. And I inherited that, saying, okay, I'm shy. So my personality was formed from other people's personalities, that was formed from other people's personalities, that was formed from other people's personalities. And that goes up to about 14 generations. So we are told at such a young age who we are, what we do, how we should behave. And actually, that we never ever come to the conclusion about who we are. There are few people that actually come to the conclusion on their own about who they are and what their personality is. So that took me to the point where I was like, okay, if my belief system is that if my belief system is affecting my manifestation. So I had everything, I had, the house, the marriage, da 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 da. And then I lost everything, even though I was so engrossed in this work. Didn't lose everything, but there was I lost a lot. then I was so engrossed in this work. How could that be? And it did come down to my self image, like we've said. So it came down to my self image. So I started saying, okay, so if I can implant different beliefs, then I'll be able to get my manifestations. But I soon found out that that was actually harder than what we're led to believe. I think some people can change their beliefs, but I wanted it to be done quickly. I've got no patience. And I then started reading a lot more about the ego and consciousness and thought, what is this? What is all this about? So my path then became very involved down spirituality, and I started studying spirituality a lot more. And over the last year, because after my marriage fell apart, I really started living from fear, doubt, and worry. Like I had my nervous system was an absolute riot. And it doesn't matter what anybody had told me, I was not able to take in that information. So my self image and self concept took a severe knocking because I went from being somebody that thought they were loved, that had support, that was a business owner with multiple businesses, to none of that. So my self image was actually controlling all my manifestations. But when we came in, when I kept thinking, okay, I need to change this belief, but I wanted it to be quicker. And I started reading and being guided more to the ego and understanding the ego, because it soon became apparent that for me to change a belief, it's like thoughts. Thoughts happen, and we have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day, maybe anywhere between about 70 upwards thousand, 70,000 thoughts a day. And I come across people and they'll say, oh, I'm a really positive thinker. And I'm like, that is amazing. However, you are only aware of 5% of those 70,000 thoughts every day. So for you to say you're a positive thinker is fabulous, but you're only a positive thinker for 70, for 5% of the 70,000, which is 3,500. The other thoughts are based on your belief systems. So I knew this and I thought, right, okay, it's all very well writing a belief and trying to convince my subconscious mind to accept that belief. But our subconscious mind is also concerned with feelings. So the feelings that I was having after my marriage stopped, the feelings that I was having was actually attracting more things to go wrong, was attracting more things for me to lose. Because my feelings, your subconscious mind is connected to your feelings, it's connected to your emotions. Um, and I started, like, as I say, understanding and studying things like the ego, and the ego plays such a big role in this. So, this is one of the things that I really wanted to speak to you about, because this is more what I'm sharing with you today is more than let's do some journaling, let's do affirmations, let's reframe our belief system, let's reframe our thoughts. This is more. That's why I've called it Manifest Plus. Because when it starts coming to manifesting the bigger things, the money, the career, the job, the love, and things that really mean something to you, that's when manifestation can stop. That's when it can really slow down. Now, I'm not saying that you can't manifest by doing all of that. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but there is an easier, quicker way to do it. And I started working with a coach a few years ago, and she was very she taught me a lot about spirituality and started coaching me a lot more about the ego and consciousness. And that was when things started to really like ignite for me. That was where my passion came from, because for those years after my marriage, I was in a state of suffering. I was in a severe state of suffering. And it dawned on me that actually we suffer most of our adult lives. We have that amazing childhood where we're out playing, we know we're going to get fed, we know that there's money, we don't worry, we don't have fears, we don't have, although I see it more and more in children now, that they are, saying, oh, I'm anxious, and they're 7 and 8 year old, you're like, what? They're learning that behavior. But when I was a child, we very much I had nothing to worry about. I didn't worry about nothing. If my friends fell out with me, great, I'll go and get new friends. When I went home, I knew I would get fed. When I needed something, I knew it would come. When I desired something, I just, I remember going to bed at night just thinking, oh, I really, really want. I remember there was a strawberry patchwork doll or something like that, and I really wanted one of these dolls. And I would lie in bed at night and think, oh God, it would be amazing to have one of these dolls, or I really want one of those dolls. But I didn't fret about it. I didn't have anxiety about it. I just thought how nice it would be to have one of those dolls. And then as we grow older, we are encouraged not to use our imagination, not to want things because that's bad and that's greedy. And because of our conditioning thereafter when we go to school and just our environment, our parents, etc., we stop using that skill and our ego is formed. And what the ego does, because I started studying the ego, this is when I was like, actually, this is why manifestation can be actually quite difficult. Because when it does come to wanting more and to having more, and we're told, to stay in the state of having it already, let's go to the place of already having it. And I would do that. But again, like my thoughts, I could only stay in that for so long, because then when I came back into 3D normal human reality, the state of having what I've already got was soon shifted, was soon taken away. Now, it's not that you have to stay in that state 24/7, but that has to be your dominant state. And I'm not convinced that it's your dominant state when you are there, when you are living in that, in the desire, or in the state of already having your desire, whether that's money, love, career. When you are in that state, you can quickly come out of that when 3D hits and you get another bill through the post, or you realize that the clients aren't coming, or that the bank account isn't there. Something will happen. And I kept thinking to myself, God, I can stay in that state, but I soon come out of it. And I kept thinking, but why? Why can I not stay in that state? And this is where I started studying the ego and started studying consciousness and dimensions. And what I've learned about the ego is it is a little minx. The ego is the ego, and I've got, please forgive me, I do have notes here. The ego is your human mind, your thinking mind, your conscious mind. The ego's job is to keep you safe. However, in this day and age, the ego doesn't need to keep you safe from anything physical. Back in the day, if you can imagine that when you went out hunting, the ego would keep you safe from the bear that was going to kill you, or perhaps some sort of food that wasn't um, good for you, or from hunters that were going to steal your food or whatever. The ego done an amazing job. But in this day and age, the ego is purely psychological. And I learned a lot from working with this coach, and I also get a lot of my information from A Course in Miracles. And I've studied with Eckhart Tolle. I've not studied with him, but I've read a lot of his books and done a lot of his material. And what I've discovered is the ego causes suffering. Anything in your life that causes you suffering is from your ego, because you are a spiritual being in a human body with an intellectual mind. The mind holds the ego. But the ego, you see, the thing is, because you're a spiritual being, you are an infinite. You will always exist. And when you leave this body, you will go back and be that beautiful star that you once were. You are infinite. But when your body, when your body dies, so does your mind and your ego. Therefore, it is not the real you. But what we've done is we have become the master to our ego. Michael Singer in The Untethered Soul will refer to the ego as your inner roommate. And it's that voice that's there all the time. All the time. You can't do that. And the amount of people that I will get reach out to me and they'll say, Suze, I really want to achieve something more in my business, in my life. And I'm like, absolutely. And then I'll say, so tell me where you're at. And they always go and they'll tell me how bad life is. And I call that they're in contrast. Because when you're working from the ego and you have a desire, that desire will come from contrast. So let's say that you want more money. It's because right now you don't have enough money. And that's coming from the ego saying you don't have enough money. So they will very quickly go into their lack. They will very quickly go into their suffering, however that may look. And they'll go back as long as they can remember about what happened. And so people will come and they'll say, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me, and this is why I can't do this. And it's almost like their reason why they aren't able to move forward. And I completely 1000% understand that. I really do. But this is coming from the ego. The ego is there to keep you small. The ego is there to cause the Course in Miracles. Let me share this with you. A Course in Miracles. And I read this the other day and it was like, oh my good gosh. Now, where is it? Let me see if I can find it. Apologies, bear with me. The ego does not love you. It is aware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives because its perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. That is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty, and it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. And another one I want to share with you is, whenever you question your value, say, God himself is incomplete without me. Remember this when the ego speaks and you will not hear it. So the opposite of ego is God. And you may find that, you're like, oh, I'm not religious. God isn't religious. God for me is a state. I never used to believe. And, I remember wanting to study faith, and I was shown a book called God Works Through Faith by Robert Russell. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Maybe not. And I absolutely, I thought, right, okay, I'll read that book. Yes, it is here. An absolutely tremendous book. God Works Through Faith. And when I ordered this book and it came through Amazon, and I was like, can't read it. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. I believe with manifestation, you have to believe in something, right? Because you're working with the universe. So if you can't relate to the universe as God, can I suggest that you refer to God as the universe? Because if you are in a state and you understand manifestation, there's something out there that you're asking, that you're working with, you'll understand universal laws. That is God for me. God is universe, source, creator, whatever you want to call it, just refer to it as that. I say God because of where I'm at on my journey. So most of us work from our ego. Most of us, the master of us is our ego. We have the ego telling us who we are, what we can do. So that, like years ago when I was saying, oh, I'm shy, that was coming from that was my ego forming. So most of us work from the ego. When you're looking to do something more, when you're looking to manifest something else in your life, and we have to work through our belief system, all we're wanting to do here is change the ego. That is my belief. That's my experience. Because when you're trying to change a belief system, a belief comes from the mind, and the mind is part of the body. It is not who you really are. And when you're trying to change something that is driven by the mind and the ego is involved, I guarantee you will find this really difficult. And yes, repetition will do it, but it can be timely. And the ego is a trickster. It will, when you're trying to change that belief, and you'll do that, and you'll do whatever it is, you'll do affirmations. And Bob Proctor said to do the affirmations. Write it 100 times in the morning, Susan, 100 times at night. I am so happy and grateful now that. But what I'm trying to do here is convince my ego, is convince my mind that I am not that person, that I am not shy. And what we're doing is we can do that, but I truly believe that the ego it's very powerful, and it's a trickster, and it will have you believe that you're like, oh yes, I am So happy and grateful now that I'm not shy, that I'm so outgoing. So happy and grateful now that I'm outgoing. So happy and grateful now that I'm outgoing. And the ego will allow you to have some of that, but sooner or later it will kick back and it will have a tantrum and it will trick you into believing the opposite. It is very, the ego is very powerful. So this is again when I started coming into working with different levels of consciousness, and I kept hearing this 3D. What the heck is this 3D consciousness? So let me explain to you a little bit, and then this should all tie together. So 3D, when you're living in 3D, you are living in your body. You are living from the ego. You are the slave to the ego. Whatever the ego tells you, you completely 1000 and trillion% believe. You believe that life is happening to you and that, people are doing things to you. You're very much in your victim. You're very much, poor me, look how bad my life is. That was me when everything fell apart with my marriage. That was me. Oh my gosh, look at what's happened to me. Poor me. I sunk down into quite severe depression. I was in a bad way, but I was in my victim. Didn't take responsibility for anything that happened because it happened to me. And it's when you're living in a purely physical state, you're living from the mind, and the mind is the ego. Not all of the mind. We do still need our mind, but you are purely taking direction from the ego. The ego is telling you how, why, when, and where. And it gives meaning to things. So when my marriage fell apart, I gave that a meaning that look at me, poor me. This is a terrible thing. And you've maybe done that yourself where you've thought this is awful. And then, a couple of months, years later, you're like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But we're very much, we give everything meaning. We give everything, oh, my bank account's so low. That means that I'm not worthy. I can't earn anymore. Your belief system starts coming up for you because you're very much, you look at your reality and you can tell instantly what your beliefs are. If your bank account is in the red all every month, there's a belief there that you aren't able to earn extra money. There's a belief there that you aren't good with money. There's a belief there that you'll never get more money. So this is what's happening when you're in the third dimension. When you're living in the third dimension, you're very much looking and seeing everything that's in front of you, and you are not able to create. That is one of the big things when you're living in the 3D. You are not able to create. You are not able to change the direction of your life. You have no control. It's happening to you. Then we think about the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is where you feel that you're connected to something else and you believe that there's more to life out there. I actually started getting a bit angry at this stage because I was a bit like, have I been living like that all this time and nobody told me? I was living in a state of suffering and nobody told me. Nobody told me there was a different way. So there was a bit anger there, a bit resentment there, because I was just like, oh, I can't believe this. So you start to want to look at things a bit further. This is where I got really heavily involved in studying this, because I was like, well, what is this all about then? How is this the answer that I've been searching for all my life about how life is not meant to be suffering? I remember looking at my mum as a child, and I would be, I would think, on a Sunday, my dad used to take us out and my mum would stay at home. And I thought, why would you stay at home? And she said, well, I've got to do I've got to clean up and I've got to make the dinner. And I thought, but why are you not having fun? And I was ridiculed for that years ago, throughout my life, because I've always just wanted to have fun. I've never wanted to take life too seriously, but I have always been ridiculed for that. Actually, that was probably me living in a different consciousness, but society was ridiculed me and I wanted to fit in, and didn't. And I think that also accumulated to my shyness, because I wanted to have fun and I wanted to be joyful, but it wasn't normal. So I just thought, all right, okay, there's obviously something wrong with me here. I believe I've always lived like that. I believe I've always known that, but society got a hold of me and gripped me, and I couldn't get out of it. So you're all connected. When you're in the 4D, you believe that there's something more out there. You start to believe that there is something else that's pulling you, that's directing you. There's something else that you are actually involved with, that you are actually part of. You maybe start wanting to think about, what's my purpose in life? Because I'm not sure it's working in this job that I hate going to every Monday, and I'm not sure it's living in this house in this country. I'm not sure. So we start going on this journey, and we hear a lot of people say, I want to find my purpose. The way to find your purpose, by the way, is to follow your joy. This brings me such joy. I study this morning, noon, and night every day because it's fascinating. And I think because I see the amount of suffering that people experience. I've seen myself suffering and just thought, what's the point of life if we're all living like this? What was the point in us being here on earth if we're all living in a state of suffering, fear, doubt, and worry, not enjoying life, and we're all desperate to get to heaven because this is so bad. But if life is so wonderful, why are we all wanting to get to heaven? Why is life not meant to be wonderful? Why are we not living a wonderful life? So this is where I go. This is what has happened on my journey. Um, Fifth dimension. When you get into the fifth dimension, it's difficult for you to return to the third dimension because you will understand and see so clearly what the third dimension really is. When you're in the fifth dimension, nothing is good or bad, it just is. It's just how it just is. The money in your bank account, it just is. Being single and being on your, being on your own and living a single life just is. Doesn't mean that you're not unlovable. There is no meaning. We don't attach meaning. Meaning comes from the ego. So when you're in the fifth dimension, you're not living from the ego. You're not having that attachment there. You have such strong feelings of love. We all operate from one or two ways. We all operate from love or fear. And when you're operating from fear, you're in ego. When you're operating from love, you're in God, source, creator, spirit, consciousness, which is 5D consciousness. You have such strong feelings of love. You don't identify with anything. You don't identify with who you are. You don't identify as Susan because Susan is the name that was given to this body, to this vessel, to this mind, to this ego, and I don't identify with that because I'm actually a source of God. I am a tentacle of God. I'm not God, but I'm part of Him. The state. I am part of God. I am part of the universe. And the universe has this amazing ability to create. And I don't have that ego, human, third density mind saying, you can't do that though. Remember what happened to you when you were at school? They said that you weren't good enough, so you can't do that. That all goes in the fifth dimension. That all goes because it can stay with you, but you do not operate from there. It's no longer your master. You don't react to things. When you're living in the fifth dimension, you believe that that life is wonderful. There is no good and bad. You don't react to the bank account and go, oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? Oh my God, oh my God. You can just completely believe because you start to see the third dimension as unreal. And many people will say that life is a game. And if for those of you that have watched The Matrix, that it's been described as a documentary, not a movie. The When you're in fifth dimension, you don't see the third dimension for what it really is, and it's all matter, and it's all happening to you. You're very much out of that picture. When you come and listen, there's more than the fifth dimension. There's the dimensions just keep going. The higher up in the dimensions you get, the stronger that feeling comes of not being attached, of time being an illusion. This is something that blew my mind. People say there's only the now. And you're like, right, so there's now, but they'll say there isn't a past. And I'm like, but there is a past. But what my understanding of that now is there is only now. And when my marriage fell apart, that happened in the now. And for me to have a memory of that now, I'm bringing the past back into the now. So the further higher density you go, you your thoughts, your imagination. You live more in your imagination because that is your lifeline to God, to say, this is what I want. You imagine it because God can't speak. So you imagine it. You imagine, your imagination is your fifth dimension. It's living in your imagination. It's constantly saying, this is what I would like to experience. This is what I would like to experience. And here's the one for you: gratitude. Because when you're in that state, and I'm saying in my imagination, I want to receive a Lamborghini. When I'm in that state, it's mine already, so I'm going to give thanks because I'm not detached from it. If I'm in my third dimension, it's like, yeah, a Lamborghini, how much money are you going to have to earn? You're going to have to do some extra shifts for that. I think you can't get a Lamborghini. Do you know the type of people who drive Lamborghinis? And that's not you. And this is all the things that your ego is going to say to you. So then what we start doing when you're in the third dimension is start trying to change matter with matter. You start trying to use your imagination and to force yourself to be in a state that you already have what it is that you desire. You force yourself to be in that state. I am in that state. I am in that state. You're convincing your mind, convincing your mind. When you move up and you start understanding the ego and start understanding consciousness, you don't need to convince your mind of anything because you're not living from your mind. That is manifestation without lifting a finger. I see, a lot of manifestation coaches will explain to you about how, use your imagination, live in the end, do your affirmations, do journaling, and all of that good stuff. But you are still using your mind. You're still using your human mind, and you're still you're still relying on the mind to do the shifting, to change density. You see, when something's here, it's in reality, it's created, it's dense matter. Third density is matter. And what we're trying to do when we are creating from that stage is you're trying to change matter with matter. You're trying to change this iPhone to a Galaxy. And I'm just like, right, how am I going to do this? Okay, how can I change this iPhone, to a Galaxy? Then you start using your mind. Okay, what I'm going to do. And then you start getting quite stressed because here's the other thing: your mind, your human mind, was never designed to create. It was never designed to swap this iPhone for a Galaxy. Never. Can't do it. Get stressed. It's not its job. Your human mind is here for you to experience life, to experience your reality. That is all. It cannot create. It can tell you what is happening. It helps you to understand what is happening. It helps you to understand, and your senses help you to understand what's happening right now. Most of you will be trying to create from right now, from third density, and you're trying to make this iPhone a Galaxy and thinking, how am I going to do it? Well, I could trade it in, but I mean, I might not get the full amount, because that, obviously that's going to lose value, so I might not get the full amount, and then, and I'm going to have to get more money to put towards the new phone. True creation doesn't come from your human, and many of you will believe that you have one mind. Many of you will believe that the ego is your mind. Many of you will believe that your ego is the part of you that we're trying to change here. I don't believe we'll ever get rid of the ego, but you will start to, when you study this work and when you enter into coaching with me, then you will start to understand what is the ego and when and what is not, and you start to make that shift from living in third density with the ego as a purely physical state, going up to your higher state, to working beyond the ego. And when you're in that state, you can look back, and we can still use the ego, we can still use the human mind, but we're not operating from that part. We're not creating from that part. We're not responding to the ego. You don't need to respond to the ego. And then anything that comes from your mind is an illusion. It is, that's where people will start calling it the matrix. Because your mind, your ego is given everything meaning. Oh, you don't have enough money in your bank. You know what that means? You're useless. You're no good with money. You'll never have money. And there goes another relationship. Yep, you're unlovable. Remember what I said. The ego vis- vacillates between suspiciousness and viciousness. It will never, it will trick you to say, oh, well, it was their fault that the relationship ended. And again, that's a perception that is based on the perception of the ego. But it was still your fault because, your dad didn't love you. And remember when that happened before, the ego will always work against you. And it's quite sad, in my opinion, that majority of humans will listen to the ego downgrade them, be vicious, be calculating, be scheming, want the worst for them. And the majority of humans believe that that is real. The majority of humans believe that is how we are meant to live. And the majority of humans, because of what's going on in our mind, is causing major dis-ease in our bodies. The body will react to what's going on in the mind. If you are somebody that has huge amounts of gosh, the word doesn't come to me, sorry. If you are somebody that has a lot of regret in your life and you carry that around with you and that becomes part of you, your body, your mind is constantly thinking about regret and how bad that is, and if only I'd done this, and that's because I'm no good. Your body's not designed to cope with that, and it will come out with ailments and will be in a state of dis-ease because that isn't what we were designed to do. The ego is man-made. The ego is something that we give our majority of our life to. But when you understand the ego, which was me, as I started to understand it, I thought, why on earth am I listening to this? And it helped me to increase my state of play and where I'm operating from. And now I now identify anything that causes me suffering is coming from the ego. Anything that is from pure love. You see, if you even look at the emotional scales, we've got fear and you've got anger, guilt, resentment, jealousy, fear, and there's probably more. And then you've got love, joy, enlightenment, happiness, contentment, fulfillment. Majority of us will operate from fear and operate from those vibrations. And here's the other thing that I want you to be aware of. Everything is energy. And even this phone, if you study Dr. Joe Dispenza, this, like, even matter is made up of predominantly energy. It's like 99.99999% energy and only 1.00001% matter. So it's understand that all comes into when you're working with consciousness and you're upgrading your consciousness. But everything is energy. Everything is energy. So if you're in a state of fear and you're looking to manifest more money because that'll change everything, you're still working in 3D. You're predominantly in fear. This is why when somebody starts working with me, we sort out your nervous system. And this is where my breath work comes in, because we can sort out your nervous system so that you can start to interpret this information. Because until you do, you're going to be in a state of fear. So we work on sorting and stabilizing your nervous system. And once your nervous system is in a calm, neutral place, then we can start operating from a place of love. Because when you're in a state of fear and the ego's constantly saying, you can't do that, you've not got the money, or, I get so many people reach out to me, say, how much is it to work with you? And then they'll come back and say, I can't afford that. And you're like, ego, you're still in your ego. So many people just are in such a state of suffering because of their ego giving them stories, their ego giving them situations and making up a whole load of nonsense. How do we move? How do we move from the ego? How do we move up in consciousness? How do we move on and start to manifest without doing anything? Because a lot of manifestation coaches out there, and I have worked with many of them as a student, are still creating from the mind. There is a much easier way, and that's creating from your spirit, from God consciousness, from 5D consciousness. And how do you start to do that? First thing that we need to understand, we need to settle your nervous system if you're in a state of fear. The second thing is we need you to understand this work is dead easy. That to understand it is so simple, and I could teach you so quickly about how this works. Doesn't take long. It's implementing it, it's embodying it. Once you understand, this is why I don't teach mindset anymore, because it's so much more than just changing your mindset. That's hard. And I'm all for easy. I'm all for ease and flow. I used to think I was lazy. And now I just think I'm not lazy at all. It's just I knew within there was an easier way to live, and I wanted that. So this was all happening unconsciously. I didn't realize this until now, and I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't like that job. I don't like that job. I don't like that job. I don't believe why should I have to work 40 weeks of the year and doing something that I flipping hate, to have 5 weeks holiday where I can be my real self. I thought that should be the other way around. But then people would ridicule me and think, you're so lazy, Susan. When you come up to the fifth dimension, you realize that that is how we're meant to live, and that we've all been tricked, we've all been conned into thinking that a way of living that isn't real. So for me, understanding the ego, and like, so somebody reaching out saying, Susan, how much is it to work with you? And I'll say, well, it's this, and they go, oh my god, I can't afford it. It lets me know where they're at. And I also like to highlight to them, well, you've said this is that's exactly what your issue is you're coming from your ego and you're making up stories. When you start understanding how the universe works, how God, universe, source, creator, whatever you're referring to it, when you start to really understand how it works, you will never have another bad thought again. When we start talking about the law of cause and effect, when we start talking about your thoughts creating your reality, but not having to force the thought and change the thought because you're ego to ego and you're like, ugh. When we start doing that, then you realize that we are meant to be human beings. That's why we got that. That's why we have that title. We're beings. We don't have to do. Most of you will still be manifesting and still doing because you believe that you are the person to do the work. So we do that by shifting how you're thinking, and that takes repetition. We start understanding the ego. We start understanding where the ego has been putting glass ceilings on your income, where the ego has been putting glass ceilings because it's a glass ceiling. Let's push through it. But we're not going to use the ego to push through it because that will want to keep us under the glass ceiling. When you start to understand that your thoughts aren't even real, your thoughts are part of the mind, so they're not even real. Your beliefs aren't real, they're part of your mind, and your mind isn't real. We use meditation, we use breath work, we use gratitude because, like I said before, when you're grateful for something, we hear this all the time in breath work, in manifestation. Be grateful. So you're great. You say, I'm going to be grateful for 5 things that I have just now. So you're grateful for coffee, water, my pen, my notepad, and my phone. Grateful for all of that. Thank you. Grateful. And then we're going to be grateful for 5 things that we're waiting to come into our experience. So I'm grateful for the Lamborghini, the house in California, the dog sanctuary, and whatever else. But I believe when I'm doing that, most of us will say that and believe that we don't have it and we're separate from it. So I might not be experiencing that with my 5 senses, But I'm grateful because I know it's mine, it's not separate. I just need to get into that vibration, the energy of already having it, because it's already mine, because creation's finished. I don't need to go and create that, which is what we're doing when you're in third dimension and third density. You're trying to create it all by changing everything around you. When you're in fifth dimension, you create it in your mind first, because everything created was started in the mind. Everything started in the mind. This phone didn't just appear. It was created in somebody's mind, somebody's imagination first. Everything starts in your mind. But when you start bringing the ego in, and you start bringing in having to change matter with matter, and you're like that, I've got this amazing dream, and I'm going to go into my imagination, and I'm going to imagine that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm earning $1 million a day. Okay, I'm going to imagine it, and your ego's instantly kicking in, going, "Shut the front door." No, you can't. You can't do that. So you're constantly battling with that. We need to understand the ego more so that you can get to manifest quickly, so you can manifest instantly, so you can manifest without doing anything that you are not wanting to do. There's always action involved. You're always going to have to take some action, but you take action that is aligned with who you are. This is why I don't believe in strategy, doing another course on strategy, unless it corresponds with my alignment and corresponds with who I am. And if I get a calling to learn how to do, or a calling to do funnels, then I might have to go and learn about that, because that's something that's to do with matter. I'm wanting to change something external. If I want to do a webinar, I don't think I would go and learn about how to do a webinar. I would just do what I felt called to do. This is about being authentic, returning to your authenticity, returning to from that 3D Susan human, returning to my spiritual being. And my spiritual being might not feel the need to go and learn how to do a webinar. I'll just do it because I'll do what lights me up. Always follow your joy, because your joy is your purpose. That was how we were created. When you're feeling joy and fulfillment, that's what you're meant to be doing. That is your purpose in life. I love coaching on this. I get so enthusiastic about it, because we shouldn't be here suffering. I've never believed that we should be here suffering, living in a state of suffering, poverty, lack. What is the flipping point of the human race then? Anything from the mind means that you're living in an illusion. You're living in the false self, not the true you. We need to come out of the false self and start to welcome in the real you. People call it the awakening, spiritual awakening. It's when you've realized, I'm not this, I'm more than that. And when you are using the mind to try to change something, if you're working with your false self, all you're trying to do is change the false self to another false self. You're trying to make your false self is trying to change the false self. So that concludes today. I've said more than enough. I think what happens, how do you do this? I know a lot of people say, but how, Susan, and for me it was having a real passion for wanting to change my life, for wanting to shift, having a real passion for knowing how successful people get to have success and others don't, having a real passion why manifestation works for some and not for others. If you want to work with me, please reach out. You can get me on Facebook or any of the other platforms. I'm on most of them now. And we can begin to work on how to manifest from the fifth dimension, how to manifest without being the doer, how to manifest with ease and flow, So thank you so much for listening.